Welcome to the G5 Hive and our next installment of our Worker Bee series, where we dive deep into the G5 college football landscape with the folks that know the teams the best. Today, we will be taking a look at the UAB Blazers, who finished 4-8 in their first year in the American Athletic Conference and just wrapped up their 2024 spring practice with their spring showcase on April 6th. We have a special guest joining us today. Welcome to the show, Evan Dudley, UAB Beat Reporter for ALdotcom at Dudley Do Right AL on X. Welcome.
Appreciate you guys having me.
Love having you on. Can you tell us a little bit about yourself and how you got into covering UAB sports, football?
I'll give you sort of a condensed version. For the longest time, I was actually a musician. Toured around the country with a few different bands, bluegrass, hard rock, jazz, all that kind of stuff. Went back, finished my music degree, and in that process realized I was about maybe a year away from a journalism degree because I, had done some of that work earlier in school. So I just went ahead and stayed an extra year of school, got a journalism degree, and decided to try out sports reporting. Just try a different challenge, a new adventure, come along in life. And I went out to Texas for about a year, covered Mineola High School. They won the 2016 Class 3A Division I state title. I believe it was Division I, might have been Division II, but got a little bit tired of East Texas. It looked a lot like Alabama, so I decided to come on back home. Was working at a local paper in Wetumpka, and the job kind of opened up. I had a friend kind of give my name to the sports editor at the time, John Talty, now with 247 Sports. He gave me a call. We talked. He talked with Tommy Dees with the Tennessean, former sports editor at the Tuscaloosa News, where I interned. I am an Alabama graduate, so from Alabama. And when I got that call, talked to me and said, "Hey, come on, let's give you a tryout, see what this happens." And since 2017, when they returned, I've been covering UAB.
Awesome. Well, we love having you here to talk about a little UAB Blazers.
All right. So the passing game was really cooking for the Blazers last season. They saw quite an uptick, going from a little under 203 yards per game in 2022 to almost 290 yards per game in 2023. Do you think that increased passing production last season was caused more by the game script, where they were in a lot of high-scoring games, or do you think it was something that the coaching staff wanted to do and that it might continue this coming season?
It was definitely a decision by the coaching staff. That's something they wanted to do coming in, increase the passing game. Also, you enter a year without as big of an offensive line as you had the previous year, and Dwayne McBride, who led the country in rushing that year in 2022. You got a lot of parts going from a massive rushing offense. And Trent Dimfer, he brings in a lot of guys. Alex Mortensen, who was a offensive analyst at Alabama for many years, to lead the offense. He brought a lot of guys in with a quarterback, background to kind of help develop that area. And so I think it was very much a decision to, go to the skies, increase the passing game a little bit, but also still relying on the run, because they still had a lot of good running backs. You had Jermaine Brown Jr., who led them in almost every category in rushing, set the all-purpose career record for UAB last season. They want to run. They have Isaiah Jacobs. He got hurt midway through the year last year. Brother of Josh Jacobs, just as big and strong as Josh. He looks the part. So they got some guys. They want to run the ball, but they're also going to pass it because they got the quarterbacks and they've got the receivers to do it right now.
Speaking of that quarterback, last year, Jacob Zeno was a big part of that passing game. Obviously, he had a great season throwing for over 3,000 yards, 20 touchdowns. How did he look in the spring?
He looked pretty good. He was comfortable. I think a year in that system made him a lot more comfortable. Just in, making the reads, not holding on to the ball as long. In the spring game, he did throw a pick, didn't throw any touchdowns, but he was getting them, in the red zone, and the running game was taking over at that point. And his one reception was by true sophomore Chris Bracey, who had a great year last year as a true freshman. But he is still very much in control of this offense. He's very comfortable. He knows where everybody's going to be at. So I don't see anybody unseating him, but behind that, you got a lot of quarterbacks that can compete for that second, third spot.
Yeah, that's kind of leading to my next question was how did that backup quarterback competition kind of shape up? Did anyone emerge or still very much a competition?
I would say it's still pretty much a competition. There was a lot of, you know, they went through about every quarterback except for Carter Putt. It was a junior college transfer last year. He was about the only one, and Jalen Kitna. Both of them didn't play in the spring game. Probably just a little bit hampered a little bit. But it seems to be, you're going to look at Harrison Barker, son of Jay Barker, who led Alabama to a championship in 1992. He is there. He was their third string last year, although he did start a game for them. You got Landry Liddy, who was a Louisiana Tech transfer, and Trace Campbell. All three of those guys will be competing around that second, third, fourth spot. I think Putt and Kitna will probably be competing into it next year. Well, Putt will be a senior this year unless he takes a COVID waiver. But it looks to be that it'll be Barker, Landry, and Campbell vying for that second and third spot.
One of the young quarterbacks who I think was there for spring practice. You haven't mentioned him before. I'm just kind of curious how he looked, and that was true freshman Adrian Posse. I think he was a big recruiting win for UAB this past season.
Absolutely. I think he's a guy they're going to want to develop and possibly make him a multi-year starter in the coming years. I think he got a series in the spring showcase, spring game, whatever you want to call it. It was essentially a spring game. They just didn't have it in the stadium. But he played a series. He looked well. I think he completed 3 passes. I think he might have been 3 or 4. Not a whole lot of reps passing in the spring game, but during the practice, he got enough reps. And that's something Differ likes to do with his quarterbacks, give them plenty of reps. They've got a lot of different teams that they can work with these quarterbacks. So I think he's going to be a development guy. He's obviously going to take a red shirt this year, but I think he has the traits that they want in a quarterback, especially with the group they have with Nick Coleman and Alex Morton, like I said, and Trent Dilfer, who led the Elite 11 QB camp for many years. So, I mean, it's going to be very much a QB factory in the coming years.
How would you describe for folks that probably haven't watched Adrian play? How would you describe his style of play?
He's very much in the pocket. He can move a little bit and make some plays outside, but I mean he's very much in the pocket. He's going to make his reads. He's going to read the defense. He's going to play quarterback. He's not going to rely just on his athleticism, which he has some, but he's going to get in there. He's going to do the studying of the playbook. He's going to read the defense. He's going to make the correct calls and put his team in the best position to be successful.
Thank you.
And then you talked about Jermaine Brown and setting some records last year. Well, now you got to replace the do-it-all back in Jermaine Brown this season. How did that running back group shape up this spring?
Well, there was not a very large group. You had Isaiah Jacobs still recovering from an injury. Armani Goodwin, LSU transfer. He got hobbled a little bit during spring practice, so he didn't play in the spring game. So they only had 3 healthy running backs in the spring game: Lee Beebe, Lee Witherspoon, and Dylan Peterson, a walk-on. All of them played pretty well. You also had Terrell McDonald, a tight end, lining up at fullback and breaking off a 30-something yard run in the spring game. It was pretty cool because Terrell McDonald's a pretty big dude at tight end. But you're looking at Lee Beebe. He's really good in the passing game as well. He can come out of the backfield. He's really good and crisp on those running back routes. So you're going to look at Isaiah Jacobs and Lee Beebe and Armani Goodwin as kind of a 3-headed monster. Maybe not to replace Jermaine Brown, but they all have the ability to do the things that he did. All 3 of them. I mean, especially Isaiah Jacobs. He's just a very large running back, but also fast, so he can really get in there. Get into the first, second levels. When there's a lot of chaos going on, and he can break loose if he needs to.
So you kind of see it more of that 3-headed approach or 3 back rotation approach as opposed to kind of a true workhorse back this year?
I would imagine so. They're going to get a lot of reps for those guys. They want to keep fresh guys on the field. They don't want to wear a guy down too much. But if a guy's got the hot hand, they're going to run with that as well, as most coaches would do. If you got a guy who's just breaking it off almost every other down, then you got to keep with the hot hand. So I think that's something they like to do. But also they're going to try to game plan with these three running backs who all have a variety of abilities to showcase on the field.
Did you have any information or were you able to glean anything this spring about how Goodwin and Jacobs' recoveries are progressing or going?
They're going well. I think Armani was just he got hobbled a little bit. He still looked good. In the few practices he had before that injury, but he's I think he's going to do well. He was a local guy, so he's got a lot of spirit in him to play for UAB after being at LSU. So he's going to be a guy that I think they're going to look to kind of be, a pass in third down back kind of guy. But you also got Lee Beebe and Isaiah Jacobs. I think those two will be your main two backs, but I think Armani's going to, really slide in there and kind of be that third guy that surprises a lot of people. But I think Isaiah, I think it was more of just, let's take the spring off. Let's make sure, you're well enough. Let's not put you in there too quick. So I think both of them will be ready for fall camp.
Awesome.
Moving over to the wide receivers, they lose one of their leaders in Tawan Palmer, but they do return exciting freshman Amari Thomas, who had an outstanding year last year. As a true freshman, he set the UAB freshman receptions record with 53 catches. Can you tell us how he looked this spring? And do you think he's kind of the next man up and ready to lead this group?
I believe so. He'll be their primary receiver coming into this year. He's obviously in a freshman, he had a great freshman year, and throughout the offseason, he just got a little bit bigger, a little bit stronger. He's running crisper routes. He's becoming more a complete receiver, which will help them so much. He's been used in the running game before, so he's just a great athlete. You can put in a lot of different places to use, and outside of him, you're looking at a lot of other younger guys that stepped up during spring practice, as well as some of the guys that returned. You got TJ Jones, a senior. He used a COVID waiver and was able to come back, a Penn State transfer from a few years back. He's a guy that's been used in the running game as well, along with Brandon Buckhalter. They got some really fast guys they can kind of run those jet sweeps and reverses with, and they've been able to gain some big yardage in that last year. So I think they're going to continue to do that with the receivers, use them downfield, use them intermediate routes, as well as use them behind the line of scrimmage, coming out of the backfield and making big plays in the running game.
Who else would you expect maybe to step up and join Thomas as starters in that group?
I think, obviously, like I mentioned, TJ Jones, you got Malachi Holt Bennett. He was an Indiana transfer from last year, but I think you're going to look at some of the younger guys as well. Cam Shanks had an incredible spring practice. I believe he caught 2 touchdowns in the spring game, had over 100 yards. He's a guy who's got incredible speed as well. So I think that's a guy you can use for a deep threat as well as using him in the backfield. Like I said, they're going to use a lot of these guys. But I think Cam Shanks is probably the receiver who had probably the best spring. But you're also looking at a lot of these other guys. Corey Milliner, he had a couple really big catches in the spring game. He's also another redshirt freshman who came in last year. So you got a lot of these young guys who are going to step up. But you still got some old guys there that are still very experienced. Like I said, Malachi Holt Bennett, TJ Jones. So it's a mix of young and old, but I think the young is going to start producing a whole lot more this season.
One player that you mentioned that I was really excited for when he came in, I believe he came over from Ole Miss, and that was Brandon Buckhalter. What can you tell us about him?
Oh, he's he's like Shanks. He's a really fast guy. They used him last year in the kind of reverse jet sweep kind of action. So they used him with his speed to get him out on the edge a whole lot. He also went down the field, had a couple downfield passes as well. So he's a guy who's got the speed to break it open in a game. It's just about trying to find the right matchup for him in that game. Because like I said, he's got the speed to burn, and he's definitely going to be a guy who can take the top off if need be.
I do have one question about the spring game. Did they line up ones versus ones? Because I know one of the big things that came out of the spring practice was Thomas was, on fire. What is it, like 8 or 9 receptions for like 80, 90 yards, something like that, and a touchdown. Was it ones versus ones or was it ones versus twos? Because sometimes, people lose sight of that. They see the stats and like, oh, this is, The
I
next,
think there were some ones versus ones at times. I think later on when you got into the second half, you started seeing, twos and threes. But I mean,
okay,
they kind of mix and match a whole lot because there was no real true format as far as 1A or one offense, two defense versus two offense, one defense. So it was more just offense versus defense. But I mean, the defense has definitely made some strides from last year, just in what they were able to showcase in the spring game, and they got a lot of young guys. As well as some transfers that have come in to really help that defense.
do they talk about how those teams got comprised? I know some schools will have captains pick, and then some the coaches pick. Did they talk about how those teams were formed?
No, not really. I think they just kind of went in, what they had as far as a depth chart at that point. Obviously, it's not, set in stone or anything with it only being a spring practice, but I think they just kind of made a depth chart out of that along with their QBs, their offensive line, and really as many receivers and running backs they got. They just really had all those guys kind of subbing in and out throughout the game, as long with their tight ends. But I think more so than anything on the offense, I think you would just see the change really more so in the offensive line and QB because with the running backs, so few running backs available during the spring, they were having to use all of them at all the time. And a lot of the receivers got a lot of reps. So I think you're just looking more offensive line QB kind of teams at this point.
Awesome. Tight end Bryce DeMoss had a good season a year ago. How did he build on that this spring?
He just keeps building. He's become a just a better tight end, understanding the system a little bit better. Obviously, that's being as much of a passing game as it is, they want to feature their tight ends. They've got good tight ends. J.C. Sibley was a young guy last year. They're really high on. He ended up getting injured. So you're looking at Bryce Davis, Dallas Payne, and Terrell McDonald as your main three guys. They're all seniors. Use their COVID waiver this past year, so they were able to come back. But Bryce is, he's going to be that leader. He had a big, I think, about a 40-something yard catch in the spring game. So it's going to be something they look to increase. Maybe not as much as they did last year, but they want to increase that number of reps that they get in the game and utilize those tight ends because as we see in today's game, the tight end is becoming more of a glamour position than what it once was.
With the loss of Palmer, do you think they're going to use the tight end more in the offense, or?
I think so, because like I said, Bryce, he can get out there. He's got the speed as a tight end to get open. He's a bigger guy. He's a mixed match guy. He's a matchup nightmare for guys. Along with Dallas Payne, he's more of a kind of a big receiver type. Terrell McDonald he can kind of do everything. He can catch, he can block, he can come out of the backfield. As I mentioned earlier in the spring game, had a 30-something yard run. So they got those three senior tight ends are going to be guys that they can really use in a lot of different ways. So I think you're going to see very much an uptick. Because like I said, last year they didn't get as much as they would have liked, but I think this year is definitely going to be an uptick in that tight end production.
Moving on to the offensive line, you mentioned them earlier. Good news perspective, they seem like they returned just about everyone, at least from a starter's perspective from a year ago. But the bad news, they ranked 100th out of 133 in terms of sacks allowed. How do they look this spring, and do you think they're going to be able to improve upon that pass protection?
They look better than what they did last year. I think the increase in defensive talent. You look at the spring game. Zeno got sacked 5 times. Of course, that spring game he can't be tackled, so just to get in touch it counts as a sack. But that defensive line had a lot of push there, a lot of pass rush in the spring game. But I think the offensive line, it's a building, and pretty much all bets are off for starters. About the only one you could really pencil into a starter position at this point would probably be Brady Wilson at center. Pretty much all the other positions are up for grabs. You have Will Parker, who was left tackle last year, a Tennessee transfer. Right now, he's battling with a redshirt freshman, Jordan Hall. Just finished a piece on him yesterday, I believe. And he's working. I believe he started the left tackle position in the spring game. So, I mean, there's a lot of a competition along that offensive line. They got a lot of young guys who are big, they're wide, they're long. Maybe not the heaviest, but that's kind of what they want. They want lighter on their feet guys who can pass block, who can get out and help in the run game, pulling guards, guys who can, are athletic and can move and, not just be the, the pillars that you have sitting there not moving much. You need to have some guys with athleticism because, as you see, the defensive line and edge rushers today, they're even more athletic. So you got to have those athletic offensive linemen. And I think that's what they've really tried to do. And you've seen that this spring with a lot of these younger guys competing with some of the returners that came, and some even advancing past them at the end of the spring. Although in the fall we'll see a lot more probably intense competition from that position.
If you had to pick an offensive player to have a breakout type season here in 2024, who do you think that would be?
I think you're looking at Cam Shanks. Just what he was able to do in the spring, he really showcased that he's a guy that they can count on. He's like Amari Thomas. He can get a lot of catches. He can run medium routes. He can run long routes. He can be used in the backfield. So it's a very much an Amari Thomas 2.0 type of player. Although came in the same class as Amari Thomas, Amari was just a little bit more ready to go as far as his receiving skills. I think Shanks had to learn a little bit more. He was a great returner in high school. He had like 3 or 4 return touchdowns, quite a few receiving touchdowns because he's probably one of the fastest players on the field. But going to college, he had to learn a little bit more of the finer details of the position, blocking downfield, running crisper routes, being where he needs to be on each play, on each snap. So I think he's going to be the guy you're really going to look at offense that has a really breakout year. But you could also look at, Lee Beebe, he had a great end to last year at the running back position. And with him and Isaiah Jacobs kind of teaming up, I think you're going to see Beebe have a lot more production than he did last year. But, odds on right now, I would look at Cam Shanks.
Going back to the receivers real quick, last year it seemed like Palmer and Thomas kind of split their time evenly, and swap back and forth between outside and slot. Do you kind of see that playing out with Shanks and Thomas, or do you think one of them is going to primarily be the slot guy and one's going to primarily be outside?
I think they're just going to move them around as much as they can. I think that's the idea behind Dilfer's offense. He wants every receiver to be able to, play an X, play a Y, play a Z, whatever you want to call it, whatever system you use. He wants those guys to be able to do everything as far as the receiving position. So I think you're going to look at those guys. They're going to continue to be matched up with different players, just trying to find that matchup advantage on the field. And I think that's what you're going to see from this passing game is just, guys moving around. You're not going to have one guy as a primary outside. You might have 2 or 3 guys that can, line it up outside and do it well. You might have 5 or 6 guys that can run a slot very well. So I think that's just, their idea is to get every guy capable of doing everything. So you're never really, lacking for anything on the offensive side. The only thing that they really need is the consistency of, catching balls and, having that consistency in a game instead of just, going against air like you would in practice.
Good stuff. Going over to the defensive side of the ball, they lose their top 2 tacklers from a year ago, one of those being linebacker Jackson Stratton. What can you tell us about the linebacker group from the spring?
I think it's actually much improved. I think Jackson, he ends up going back to UNA, North Alabama, FCS school. That's actually in his hometown of Muscle Shoals, Florence, Muscle Shoals, Shoals area. Shout out Fame Studios, Rolling Stones, Leonard Skinner, all that. But anyways, I think he might have been just a bit too slow in what they were trying to lose. He was a bigger guy, but maybe a little bit slow as far as lateral movement. They had a guy, Everett Russaw, who was a true freshman last year. He's much bigger, much faster, and he's much more glued into the system, what they were doing. But he's a guy who came out last year, ended up starting a few games. So he's in there in the middle. And Michael Moore, who was originally kind of an outside linebacker, edge rusher top, they moved him inside last year near the end of the season with Jackson, maybe, showing that he wasn't maybe had the ability to play within Sione's system on defense. But, Michael Moore being there with Everett Russaw, that's a very dangerous middle linebacker combo. And I think that's going to be your 2 main guys, your 2 starters in the inside. And you got a lot of other guys who've got some talent. They brought in some junior college transfers. They brought in some portal transfers. So I think the linebackers have definitely been upgraded since last year.
Kind of reading between the lines in that answer there, you talked about true freshman linebacker Everett Russaw. And he certainly had an impressive debut for a true freshman, 50 tackles, a sack, a fumble recovery. I'm assuming we can expect his role to increase, and he's probably the guy kind of taking over that middle linebacker role where Stratton was last year.
Yeah, absolutely. He's gonna kind of be their guy, probably making the calls more so than Michael. Although that Michael will probably make plenty as well because they're going to use two middle linebackers most times. Michael's just a big guy, but he's also got the speed to move laterally within that system. So I think you're going to see Michael Moore and Everett Rousseau, both those guys, be the primary alphas in the middle. Probably Everett Rousseau will probably be more the play caller just because he's a young guy. He's going to understand that system. It's very fresh to him rather than Michael, who's been through, who learned a lot from the previous staff. So, it's going to be a little bit harder for older guys to really, comprehend a full system. But I think Everett's really got that down. I think him and Michael were just going to be a very dangerous duo for them in the middle.
How did the Purdue transfer Octavius Brothers look in the spring, and what kind of role do you think he might have in 24?
I think he's going to end up having a pretty good one. I mean, he's a redshirt senior. Yeah, he's redshirt senior, so he's got his 1 year. I think he's going to be a guy they use quite a bit. He'll be kind of rotated in there along with Russo and Michael Moore. Of course, he might end up playing some outside as well. These are some positions they're going to just rotate a little bit, especially in the fall when they get to a little bit more experimentation. Along with him, you had Ezra Odenjor come in. They've kind of placed him as an edge rusher, not really a true linebacker, but more of an edge rusher of the spring. So a lot of this talent they brought in the linebacker position is just it's created a lot of more depth for them than they had last year.
So you talked about there a little bit of Ezra Odenjor. He is a Georgia Tech transfer. How did he look this spring, and what do you think? How do you think he's going to be used here?
I think he'll be able to get into the rotation. You got guys like Emmanuel Waller. Let's see, Emmanuel Waller. Obviously, you got some other guys in there. James Smart, Talon McNichols, some other linebackers. But primarily the outside linebacker position, their edge rushers. I think Owenjor is going to do really well in there. You got Kendall Johnson as well. He's kind of more of a Sam, and I think Emmanuel Waller will be more of a Sam end, whereas the edge rushers are going to be more of that, the outside linebacker kind of position. But that's where I think Owenjor is going to kind of fill into there. Along with Tyler Thomas, Desmond Little, a former LSU transfer as well. So I think that pass rushing, and that's what they really wanted, was more of a pass rush from that defensive line, and you're getting that from that edge rusher and that Sam in, along with a very concise defensive interior defensive line as well. But Odenjor, I think he'll be into that rotation on the edge, along with like I said, Tyler Thomas and Desmond Little.
So with a lot of teams, the importance is the line, whether it's offense or defensive line. This defensive line returns just about everybody from a year ago. How did they look this spring? And did
Much
anyone stand out?
Much improved. You look at Ladarius Cox. He's an Indiana transfer. He really stood out. Kevin Penn was able to take care of a COVID waiver, and he comes back for a final season. He had his best year last year, and he's going to be that big defensive tackle they have in the middle. He's going to be that kind of run stuffer because he is probably their biggest defensive lineman. Obviously, they do lose Fish McWilliams, who was a guy who'd been on that line for many years. But I think Kevin Penn returning was just huge for them as far as experience and leadership. But bringing in Ladarius Cox, who's got plenty of experience, helps out. And you got a lot of other younger guys, McQuan Merriweather, just a lot of the guys they got last year, and maybe a few guys from this year because they've went heavy on the defensive line the last couple of years, which is something we've really seen in some of the more successful programs. Honestly, you could look back maybe about 15 years ago, following the Johnny Manziel beating Alabama in Tuscaloosa. You look at Nick Saban in the next recruiting cycle, he had 8 to 10 defensive linemen because he could see it right there that you're gonna, with the offenses becoming so much more high octane, that he knew he was going to have that many defensive linemen. So that's kind of become standard now. 15 years later, that's just a very standard thing in recruiting, is getting that many defensive linemen because you're going to need that freshness rotating almost every single down.
Going to the defensive backfield, their other leading tackler from a year ago, safety Keandre Swoops, graduated, which kind of leaves a big hole back there. How did that group look this spring, and did anyone kind of step up to fill his role?
Well, I think Chris Bracey, AJ Brown, some young guys they've had last year, I think they can kind of step in that position. They brought in some portal guys, Sherrod Bryant, Adrian Maddox. I think those are some guys who are going to help in the very back end, along with Ike and Ray Thurton the third. But the kind of that star position where Keandre played at will, definitely going to need someone. I'm pretty sure. I think it would Chris Bracey would probably be the one to kind of take up that that position. But it's going to be a lot of different guys playing and seeing how they kind of mold within that secondary because they got some experience, but they also brought in some new guys. So I think it's a very interesting position group to see. Maybe not the strongest, but it's going to be interesting to see how they kind of grow together, get chemistry, especially in that back end. Having to play in a conference that's got a lot of passing offenses, along with a couple of historically option teams that are going a little bit more higher octane on the offense. So I think you're just going to look and see that that's just going to continue along on that trend.
You mentioned Sherrod Bryant coming over from Georgia Tech. Do you kind of see him more as like the center field, the guy in center field playing that deeper free safety?
Yeah, I think that's kind of going to be his role along with Ray Thornton. I think those two guys are going to kind of share that spot a little bit. Like I said, mentioned there's just you got to rotate guys in on defense now. It's just something. So there's no so much maybe glamour to being a starter because you're going to play if you're in that second position. You're going to have to be on the field quite a bit. So I think Sherrod and Ray Thornton kind of share that. You look at Ike on the other side at strong safety, probably with Maddox a little bit. And we'll kind of see how Chris Bracey and A.J. Brown kind of fit into that mold, whether they kind of play that star position or if they kind of go in the back end, maybe they bring Sherrod down a little bit. So it's going to see more so. We'll see more how they kind of use those guys in fall camp because I think maybe in spring they're just more so, going a lot of the schematics of what they're wanting to do. But I think we'll kind of see who's really playing those spots in the fall.
If you had to pick a defensive player to have kind of their breakout season here in 2024, who would that be?
I'd go with Emmanuel Waller. He was a kid, a true freshman last year. He got in a few games, so he was able to get the red shirt rule and retain that year of eligibility. But in the spring, he was he grew quite a bit, added a lot more muscle to his frame. He was already a pretty big guy. 6'4". He had about 15 pounds. He's 265, so 6'4", 265. In a Sam in position. I mean, he was screaming off the edge during spring. I think he had about 2 or 3 sacks on Zeno in the spring game by himself. So this is a guy who's got the engine. He's young. He's got the hunger in him. So I think this is a guy you're going to see as kind of their breakout guy, especially in that front seven.
So he's that guy that's kind of making it happen. There's some sacks that happen that it's more of a product of everybody else kind of doing stuff, but you think he's going to be that guy creating them?
Yeah, he was creating a lot in the spring game himself, as well as just regular practices. But this is a guy. His engine is just so high running. He's a local guy too. He is very much committed to UAB. When he made the commitment, so he's very much likes to call himself the hometown hero. So this is it means something to him to play for UAB. And so I think that's just, kind of goes into his abilities, just that hunger to succeed is really opened up this springtime. Because like I said, he really is creating those sacks for that defense instead of just kind of coming in with the chaos. He's creating a lot of the chaos himself.
Now that spring practice is over, which position group or groups do you feel is the most concerning?
Probably offensive line still. Nothing's really been settled there. Like I said, Brady Wilson's probably the only guy you can pencil in as a first day starter at center. But all the other positions are really up for grabs. Spring kind of gave us a little bit of a look into what they're looking at, but I think as you kind of see in the fall camp, we'll really get to where they want to go. But we're really not going to know nothing about that offensive line until we see them on the field against another team, especially coming off a year like that year. Now, some of it might have been Zeno holding on to the ball a little bit longer than he needed to. I think that will help a little bit as well. Just a year in the system, he's able to read those defenses well. He's able to get the ball out quicker. So I think that's going to help a little bit on the offensive line and not so much pressure is put on them. But a lot of these younger guys that came in are natural pass blockers. Like I mentioned, Jordan Hall, 6'8" guy. He's really long. So he's kind of a natural pass blocker. So a lot of these young guys they brought in are going to really help with that aspect of the game. And it's really more so becoming a better run blocking scheme. But I think you're looking at offensive line is really the more concerning position group right now, just because we don't know what it's going to be, as of right now in the spring. All the other positions, we have a lot better idea of what's going to be there.
With the spring portal session getting ready to start here in the next probably, I guess, week, less than a week, maybe.
Tuesday, Tuesdays when those open.
Is there anything that you think they might be looking for in that window to try to add to the team?
They might try to add maybe another running back, maybe some defensive players. I think that's what you're looking at. Just with the small running back group that they got, they might want to try to get a guy, coming out, maybe not a starter, but a guy who's got the talent that can be developed. A little bit younger guy, not a senior guy looking for, one last ride. I think that's what they're going to be looking for in the portal: running backs, some defensive players. They got plenty of defensive linemen, plenty of linebackers, but they'll probably might look for some corners as well. They got a few number of corners, although they have Mac McWilliams and Colby Dipson returning. Those are two guys who pretty much led the American in pass deflections. I think Colby Dipsey did lead the American in pass deflections last year. So these are guys who know how to play the position, but it's more about the rest of the guys kind of showing up for them.
What would you say is the main strength for this team going into 2024?
You're looking at wide receivers, probably the edge rusher. The edge rushers, it's been night and day as far as getting a pass rush than what they were last year. They were, they were able to get some, but it was more chaos, bring more coverage sacks last year. Than the guys actually creating that chaos past the line of scrimmage. So I think you're just, that's really where they're going to have to look at this year.
When it comes to recruitment of new players and the retention of the existing players, how have you seen the impacts of NIL and obviously the transfer portal impact UAB?
Uh, I think it's been more of a positive for them. They've been able to get some guys come in that have played really well for them, especially the last couple of years. Going back to when Bill Clark was still coach, they were able to bring in some really good guys. Jacob Zeno was one of those guys that came in. But I think with Trent Dilfer, he wants to get a good number of prep guys. He wants to develop those guys, but also get the portal to where you get the guys that you need. So I think that's kind of more of a, more prep heavy and relying on the portal to fill the holes that you need rather than try to just, monopolize all the talent that you can and keep it from others. And going into the spring, I think, I don't think there'll be a lot of entries in the portal from UAB. And if there are, there'll probably be guys who might not be looking at a lot of playing time this year. So I think there'll probably be more positive impact for them this coming year.
And it seems like more and more of the demands of a head coach are turning into being more of like a general manager, because you got to recruit the players that you want to come in. You've also got to recruit the team that you already have to try to keep them to stay. Fundraising, and it seems to be becoming a little bit less of the X's and O's and actually teaching and developing. You said Dilfer, wants to develop these guys. Do you do you not see that trend happening at UAB, or is there parts of that you kind of still see?
I think Trent's very much in that kind of CEO mode. I mean, obviously he wants to develop guys. He wants to be on the X's and O's too, because he is an X's and O's guy. But he's for many years on ESPN, so he knows how to talk with the media. So he's he's a character. UAB is probably the one program in the American that's probably got the two most character-driven head coaches in their main sports, with Andy Kennedy in basketball and Trent Dilfer in football. Both those guys worked in media. They know how to talk with people. They know how to build relationships, and I think that's what makes. I think that's what will make Trent ultimately successful. Even though they didn't have the year they won in the first year, he's a guy who's going to accept the responsibility of not having a good year. He's not going to mess around with coach talk a lot of the times. He's going to tell you what he feels. But I think just having that background of being in the media, leading the lead 11 QB count, kind of gives him that kind of CEO mentality of let his coaches do what they need to do and you be the face of the program, because he is that kind of guy. He's won a Super Bowl. He's he is a guy who's known in popular culture. So he is a guy who can get things done from that CEO kind of standpoint of interacting with boosters and media and doing all the kind of things that a CEO coach needs, rather than just spending all of your time on the field working with X's and O's, and which is why you hire good guys for your staff, because you want to trust them to do that while you're trying to actually lead the program and build the program more than just what it is on the field.
What was that vibe around the community when he had that soundbite last year? I think it was on ESPN or something. He's like, come try to take my players, and trying to keep the P5. I mean, he seemed to like welcome, like, come and try to take him. You're not going to get him. And how did that get accepted or taken in the community there?
I think they liked it. I think they liked the stand from him, that not backing down from Power Five schools trying to come in and poach players. He said he's got text messages from other schools that sent his kids, but I mean he's comfortable that he's got a program that can develop guys to go to the league. He has connections to the league, multiple connections to the league, and I think that's is really why you've not seen as much of a portal exodus from Trent Dilfer, especially this past off season, except for guys that maybe they just were ready to move on from, and those guys were ready to move on from UAB. But I think just knowing him and just his kind of personality aids in that a whole lot.
What do you think success looks like for this UAB football team in 2024? At the end of the day, the season's over. What would you look back and say, "Oh, this was a successful year"?
Uh, let's see. Obviously, you got to get to a bowl game this year. 4-8. You had been to, you had 5 or 6 straight seasons of bowl eligibility. Take away the 2 years you didn't have a program. The first year Bill Clark got there, they were 6-6. So the moment Bill Clark got there, they had been a bowl eligible program every single year until last year. So I know Trent wants to get that back. Get bowl eligible. This is a program that's been built itself. Before that, they were essentially the doormat of FBS. UAB, you could always play UAB and get a win. They just were that bad. And a lot of that was just they didn't have the facilities. They didn't have the backing to be a successful program. Before Bill Clark got there, their office was an old dentist office, and they had a field with a track around it, and concrete on the field itself that they had to cover up. So I mean, they just had no facilities. But since then, we've seen where UAB has been able to do and what it can do when it's got the backing, and with their operations complex, with the new stadium, there's no reason they shouldn't be successful. So a bowl game is got to be the least they have to do this year. But definitely defensive improvement that is observable. That is something that has to be done. I don't think anyone's worried too much about the offense. It's going to flow. They're going to score points.
Yeah.
But the defense has got to make stops. They have got to get stops on third down. That was somewhere they were really bad last year. They could get them to get them stops on good first, second down, but third medium, third and short, third and long, they were allowing conversion. So that's something that's got to really improve. Marketed defensive improvement in a bowl game will be success at the end of this year.
Yeah, I mean, it seemed like they were in a lot of shootouts last year, and I think while that's generally exciting, right? A lot of offense is exciting. It's probably not as exciting for the head coaches as it might be for the fans.
And being in Alabama, fans from Alabama, whether you're Alabama, Auburn, UAB, Troy, Jacksonville Stadium, when you like defense, you get more excited about great defensive plays than you do a great offensive play. I still think the George Teague rundown of Lamar Thomas, even though it never counted, is still the greatest defensive play ever. And it can hype me up today, even it's been 30 some odd years since that play. So, I mean, just here in the South, I mean, it's defense. You want your defense to play great. So that's something they really got to improve on, because I think that was probably the biggest complaint from the fan base last year, was just the lack of defensive effort.
So is there anything else that you want to share or think that we should know about this UAB Blazer team going here in 2024?
I think it's just an interesting team coming from a 4-8 first year under Trent Dilfer. I think we're going to see almost a 180 from what they were last year. Just having that year getting under their belt, especially the defensive system. They might not have just had the guys that Sione needed to play that defensive system. Like I mentioned, Jackson Bratton, he was a starter last year. He enters the portal, ends up dropping down to an FCS school. So it was just a guy that wasn't really built for their system. And now they have 2 guys, Michael Moore, Everett Rosell in that middle. They're both big. They're both fast. They're the guys they want. So I think we're just going to see a really 180 from this team this next year. I think the defense is going to be much improved. I think the offense is going to be a lot more consistent. There were times where they did fail at that last year where they weren't inconsistent. If they had that consistency, they might have won a few of those games they were in some of those shootouts, save maybe the Navy game where the offense just did not show up that game.
Well, I think I speak for Justice and I know I speak for myself, but this 4-8 UAB team, I don't think I've ever been so excited about a 4-8 team. There's just a lot of hype, around BB. Zeno can build on last year. Mari Thomas.
Yeah, Mari
And
Thomas looks like a future star.
yeah,
Oh yeah, and I mean, just being a true freshman coming in and having that success, he was just a very I wouldn't say a finished product, but he was very polished coming into college. So I think that's what helps him out so much more. Just being very polished in that, as far as running routes and being able to be consistent with his catches. That's what really helped him out, and just being able to get in, learn that system quick. Because it was a little bit of a slow burn because he wasn't featured. Those first couple of games, he had a couple of catches, a couple of targets, but it wasn't really till that Georgia game where he really broke out and a true freshman wide receiver showing out against Georgia. That pretty much sealed the deal for him as far as having a breakout season right there.
yeah. Then you got the defense. You got a lot of the line coming back, and what you're saying is it's going to be more chaos that they're creating, and hey, we want a better defense. Just a recipe for a great season, and I can't wait to see it.
Yeah, if the defense improves, like it seems that they have, then this will be a successful season. Which is really all teams really need is a great defense, because their offense is created to score those points, but also lay it on the ground, run the ball, and keep the ball out of the other team's hand. Kind of play the game a little bit more to where you're not in a shootout a little bit. So it's really just it comes down to their defense this next season.
All right. Well, we thank you for your time, Evan, and hopefully we'll see the Blazers in a bowl game in 2024.
Thank you so much, guys. Happy to be with you.